The air in the conclave of shards was as cold and still as the void between galaxies. It was a sculpted silence, ancient and heavy, designed to press upon the minds of those gathered and enforce the solemnity of their purpose. High Prelate Vorlag felt it as a physical weight upon his slender, crystalline carapace. His 6 limbs were folded in the precise configuration of contemplative authority, his multifaceted eyes fixed upon the immense holographic sphere that dominated the center of the chamber. Within it, a star system burned in its death throes. The star, designated K731 by their cartographers, was a seething wound of celestial energy, its corona lashing out with tendrils of plasma that scoured the surfaces of its orbiting worlds. One of those worlds, the third, was a place of tragic significance. It was the homeworld of the krill, a sentient species on the cusp of interstellar awareness, now trapped in the final, agonizing moments of their existence. The conclave had debated their fate for cycles, bound by the rigid tenets of the veil of non-interference, a doctrine as old as their empire. To intervene was to shatter a culture, to abstain was to witness an extinction. But it was not the dying star or the doomed krill that held the conclave in a state of unprecedented tension. It was the object that had appeared in the system without warning, without precedent. Hanging in the deep black, a mote of perfect, geometric nothingness against the stellar chaos, was a ship. It was a human ship. The conclave's archives on humanity were thin, contradictory, and deeply unsettling. They were a young species, barely a whisper on the galactic stage, known for their rapid, almost violent expansion and their bafflingly sentimental art. They were considered chaotic, emotional, and dangerously unpredictable, a species of Deathworlders themselves, forged in a crucible of planetary violence that the serene Glyptons could scarcely comprehend. And now they had reached another species of Deathworlders, the krill, facing their ultimate crisis. The Glyptons had expected a flotilla of clumsy aid vessels, a grand, emotional gesture of charity that would likely do more harm than good. They had expected a broadcast of weeping and condolences. They had expected sentiment. They had not expected this. The ship was a long, obsidian monolith, utterly devoid of markings, lights, or any discernible features. It did not reflect the light of the dying star. It seemed to drink it, its surfaces a patch of absolute void. Their most sensitive instruments, arrays capable of discerning the molecular composition of a comet's tail from a light-year away, returned nothing. No energy signature, no drive plume, no communication signals, no life signs. It was a tomb, a ghost, a perfect and profound negation of existence floating at a precise Lagrange point, equidistant from the dying sun and the world of the krill. It was a silent, menacing sentinel, and its presence felt less like an offer of aid and more like a verdict. Strategos Kalin broke the silence, his voice a low, resonant chime that grated against the chamber's stillness. His carapace was thicker than Vorlag's, scarred from campaigns in the rimward expanses, and his posture was one of coiled aggression. "It is a weapon," he declared, the bioluminescent patterns on his forelimbs shifting to a sharp, accusatory crimson. "Look at it. It is the physical embodiment of a threat. The humans reached the Deathworlders' prelate, but they did not send aid. They sent a blade to the throat of that system. Perhaps they intend to harvest the planet's resources after the krill are gone. Or perhaps this is a demonstration, a message to us and to the wider galaxy. Where they go, they claim." Vorlag's own patterns pulsed a cool, troubled blue. He did not turn his gaze from the hologram. "A demonstration of what, Strategos? Silence? Inaction? The vessel has done nothing. It has not moved. It has not broadcast. It is as inert as a rogue asteroid." "Inertia can be a statement of power," Kalin countered, his 6 limbs gesturing toward the sphere. "Only the supremely confident can afford to be so still in the face of such chaos. They are waiting, observing, judging. Our protocols, our ancient laws have paralyzed us into spectatorship. The humans, in their youthful arrogance, have appointed themselves executioners or, perhaps worse, opportunistic scavengers." From the other side of the chamber, a softer voice emerged, carrying the weight of ages. It was Loremaster Xylia, her carapace thin and almost translucent with time, her bioluminescent patterns a gentle, shifting violet. Her role was not to command or to strategize, but to remember. "Or we are projecting our own fears onto a slate we do not understand. We have cataloged human behavior as paradoxical. In one instance, they cross half a quadrant to deliver medical supplies to a colony afflicted by a simple atmospheric blight. In another, they engage in BR. Utile, self-destructive conflicts over matters of abstract principle. They are a species of profound contradictions. To assume this vessel is a weapon is to see only one facet of their nature. A weapon is the most logical assumption, Kalen pressed, his crimson glow intensifying. It is the simplest explanation for its design. It is built for intimidation. It is stark, brutalist, and absolute. It is a dangerous ship, and it is in a system on our border witnessing a galactic-level event. Its presence is an act of aggression, even if it does nothing but sit there. The danger of a thing is not always in its intended function, Xylia replied, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the distant, dying star. A tool for creation in the wrong hands becomes a tool for destruction. We do not know what this ship is. We only know what it is not. It is not a hospital. It is not a transport. It is not a message of hope. The humans have sent something else entirely. Perhaps something we lack the philosophical framework to comprehend. Vorlag let the silence settle again, the weight of his office pressing down. The Glypton Empire had maintained peace and stability across thousands of suns for millennia by adhering to a single guiding principle: order. The universe was a delicate, intricate mechanism, and the greatest virtue was to understand one's place within it, to cause no ripples, to respect the natural unfolding of cosmic law. The humans were a tidal wave of chaos. They did not seem to respect the mechanism. They sought to dismantle it and rebuild it in their own image. This ship, this silent black anomaly, was the ultimate expression of that terrifying ethos. It was an intrusion, a deliberate and calculated act in a place where they had no right to be. And yet the Glyptons could do nothing but watch. To engage the human ship would be to violate the very veil they were agonizing over. To ignore it felt like an abdication of their duty as the galaxy's oldest stewards. The sensor technicians in the lower galleries of the conclave chamber maintained their vigilant watch, their chitinous limbs moving with practiced efficiency across crystalline control surfaces. One of them, a junior adept, suddenly stiffened. A soft chime, barely audible, echoed through the vast space. It was the chime of an incoming signal, but it was not from the human ship. It was from the surface of the Krill homeworld. It was a desperate, wideband transmission, a final scream into the darkness. Their planetary systems were failing. Their atmosphere was being stripped away by the solar flares. The message was a jumble of panicked data, scientific readings, and what the translation algorithms identified with low confidence as elegiac poetry. It was a farewell. And as the Krill's last message played out, a final heartbreaking testament to a civilization's end, the human ship did something. A single, almost imperceptible change. A thin line of pure white light, no thicker than a blade of grass, appeared along the vessel's equator. It did not glow, it was simply light. A perfect, clean incision in the absolute black of the hull. It was not a weapon charging. It was not a communication array activating. It was something else, something alien and unknowable. Kalen's bioluminescence flashed. It prepares to act. Now we will see its purpose. It will fire. It will strip the planet bare before the star does. Or, Xylia whispered, her voice filled with a terrible awe, it is preparing to do something else, something we have not considered. Vorlag felt the cold grip of uncertainty tighten. For millennia, the Glyptons had been the galaxy's great observers, its calm and rational center. They had witnessed the birth and death of stars, the rise and fall of lesser empires. They had always understood. But looking at that silent black ship, bisected by a line of impossible light, Vorlag was confronted with a terrifying truth. For the first time in 10,000 years, his empire was facing something it did not understand at all. And it was a creation of the young, emotional, chaotic species they had so easily dismissed. The humans were here, at the deathbed of a world, and they had brought a mystery that felt more profound and more dangerous than any weapon. The silence of the ship was no longer passive. It felt like the held breath before a revelation that would change everything. For several long, agonizing periods, nothing more happened. The line of light on the human vessel remained, a static, unblinking declaration. The final, desperate message from the Krill faded into the hiss of cosmic background radiation. The star itself seemed to swell, its turbulent surface churning with renewed fury. The conclave remained frozen, a tableau of silent, waiting figures, each lost in their own interpretation of the unfolding events. Vorlag's mind raced through diplomatic protocols, contingency plans, and the cascading consequences of any potential action. To hail the humans was to acknowledge their right to be there, to legitimize their intrusion. To challenge them was to risk a conflict with a species whose technological capabilities were now terrifyingly ambiguous. To do nothing was to cede the initiative, to become a passive observer in their own sphere of influence. Every path seemed to lead to a diminished future for the Glypton Empire. Kalen's patience, never a significant virtue, was wearing thin. The crimson on his carapace had deepened to a dark, ominous burgundy. Their stillness is a form of psychological warfare. They are demonstrating their immunity to the pressures of time, to the emotional gravity of the moment. They are showing us that the death of a world is a triviality to them, a moment to be observed with cold detachment before they enact their will. This is the nature of the Deathworlder mind, prelate. Survival at any cost. Empathy is a currency they cannot afford. You speak of their mind as if you have looked inside it, strategos, Xylia countered, her violet light soft but unwavering. We have only observed their shadows. You see a predator in that ship's design. I see an instrument of immense precision. A surgeon's scalpel is also a blade, but its purpose is to heal, not to kill. We are interpreting this through the lens of our own philosophy, which values non-interference above all. What if the human philosophy is different? What if they believe that the ultimate moral imperative is not to abstain, but to act, even if the action is misunderstood? To act without context is recklessness, Kalen retorted. To act in another's territory without communication is arrogance. They are behaving like gods, dispensing judgment from on high. If they are surgeons, they are performing their operation on a patient who has not consented, in a room that is not theirs. The debate could have spiraled for cycles, as was the Glypton way. But it was cut short by another chime from the censor adept. This one was different. It was a clear, sharp tone indicating a focused, directional transmission. It was emanating from the human ship. It was directed with unwavering precision at the Conclave's flagship, which hung cloaked and silent in the outer system, observing. They had been seen. Their stealth technology, the pride of the Glypton fleet, had been rendered useless. The humans had known they were there all along. A cold wave of shock rippled through the chamber. Kalen's limbs twitched, an involuntary reaction of a warrior who has been outmaneuvered. Vorlag felt his own composure crack, the serene authority of his office threatened by this casual display of superior detection. The humans had not just been waiting, they had been watching the watchers. "They are hailing us," the censor adept announced, his voice tight with tension. "Standard universal carrier frequency, no encryption, it is an invitation to communicate." An invitation, Kalen's voice was laced with disbelief. After all this silence, this intimidation, they now wish to talk. "It would be unwise to refuse," Xylia said calmly, though her own bioluminescent patterns wavered slightly. "They have extended a hand. To refuse it now would be an explicit act of hostility. We must know their intent." Vorlag hesitated for only a moment. The humans had seized the initiative completely. The Glyptons were no longer in a position of power, but were now respondents, forced to play by the rules of a game they did not understand. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "Open the channel. Project the image to the central sphere. Let the entire conclave bear witness." The great holographic starscape of the K-731 system dissolved, replaced by a view from their flagship's bridge. The comms channel opened with a soft hiss. For a moment there was only static, and then the image resolved. It was not a bridge teeming with a bustling crew, nor was it a grand diplomatic chamber. It was a single human figure standing in a room of minimalist design. The walls were a soft, neutral gray, and there was no furniture, no instrumentation, no adornment of any kind. It was a space designed for pure function, devoid of all sentiment or artistry. The human was a female of her species. Her hair was dark, pulled back severely from her face. Her features were sharp, her expression calm and unreadable. She wore a simple dark uniform with no insignia or rank indicators. She was not smiling, nor was she frowning. Her dark eyes seemed to look directly at Vorlag, as if she could see through the layers of technology and into the heart of the conclave chamber itself. She did not look like a warrior. She did not look like a diplomat. She looked like a scholar, a technician, an individual for whom emotion was an unnecessary variable in a complex equation. "This is Ambassador Eva Rostova of the Human Systems Alliance, commanding the vessel Solitude," she said. Her voice was as calm and neutral as her expression. It was transmitted wit. Without any of the subtle tonal shifts that conveyed status or emotion in Glypton communication. It was a stream of pure information. "We acknowledge your presence, High Prelate Vorlag of the Glypton Empire. We have been aware of your observation fleet since our arrival." The directness of the address was another shock. She knew Vorlag's name, his title. Their intelligence on the Glyptons was clearly far more extensive than the Glyptons' intelligence on them. Vorlag gathered his composure, his formal training taking over. His own voice when he spoke was a carefully modulated series of chimes and tones, the language of high diplomacy. "Ambassador Rostova, your arrival in the K-731 system was unexpected. You are in a sovereign territory observing a pre-interstellar species, an act that stands in violation of several galactic accords, including the Veil of Non-Interference, to which your own people have given provisional assent. Rostova's expression did not change. We are aware of the accords. We are also aware of their limitations in the face of an event of this magnitude. The accords were written to prevent cultural contamination and exploitation. They were not written to mandate inaction in the face of an existential threat that transcends cultural boundaries. The death of a star is a natural event, Kalen interjected, his voice sharp. Vorlag shot him a silencing glance, but the strategos was too incensed to be deterred. It is a tragedy, but it is part of the cosmic order. Your presence here with a vessel of intimidating design suggests you intend to impose your own order. For the first time, a flicker of something moved in Rostova's eyes. It was not emotion, but perhaps a deep, weary understanding. Strategos Kalen, she said, acknowledging him by name and rank, further unnerving the conclave. Your assessment of our vessel is based on Glypton military philosophy. You see a weapon because you are a warrior. You see a lack of adornment and interpret it as a statement of aggression. You are not wrong to call it a dangerous ship. You are simply wrong about the nature of the danger, and to whom it is directed. Then enlighten us, Vorlag said, his tone turning colder. What is the purpose of the solitude? Why have you come to the grave of a world in a ship that appears to be a monument to death itself? Rostova was silent for a moment, her gaze unwavering. We did not send aid, food, ships, medicine, because those things are irrelevant to the true nature of the crisis. The Krill are not dying simply because their star is expiring. They are dying because of how it is expiring. Your long-range sensors, as sophisticated as they are, can only measure energy output, particle density, and gravitational fluctuations. They cannot measure the stability of causality. A ripple of confusion went through the chamber. Xylia's violet patterns pulsed with intense curiosity. Causality? She asked, her voice soft. The principle of cause and effect, that is a metaphysical concept, ambassador, not a measurable physical property. To you it is, Rostova replied, and her words landed with the force of a physical blow. To us, it is a fundamental pillar of reality and one that can be fractured. The star K731 is not undergoing a standard supernova. It is undergoing asynchronous temporal decay. Its core has collapsed in a way that is causing localized ripples in the structure of spacetime. Past, present, and future are beginning to decohere within this system. The Krill are not just being burned, their entire history is being erased. Their extinction is becoming a retroactive absolute, a state that will have always been true. The silence that followed was more profound than any that had come before. The conclave was filled with the greatest minds of the Glypton Empire, beings who had contemplated the deepest secrets of the cosmos for millennia. But what the human ambassador was describing was not physics. It was blasphemy. It was a violation of the most fundamental law of existence. Kalen was the first to find his voice, though it was strained with disbelief. That is impossible. A fantasy. The arrow of time is immutable. Is it? Rostova's voice remained level, but it carried a new weight, the weight of a terrible certainty. Humanity's home system orbits a G-type main sequence star, a stable, predictable engine of life. But our curiosity led us to the anomalies, the outliers. We have studied pulsars that spin at the edge of rotational integrity, black holes that warp the very geometry of space. We learned that the universe is not the gentle, ordered mechanism your philosophy describes. It is a place of infinite, terrifying possibilities. We have seen things that would shatter your understanding of order. She gestured, not with her hands, but with a subtle nod of her head. The view behind her changed. The plain gray wall dissolved into a swirling vortex of data, a complex, multi-dimensional representation of the K731 system. It was not a star map. It was a flowing, chaotic tapestry of timelines, branching and collapsing, folding in on themselves. At the center was the dying star, a knot of pure temporal paradox. This is what is happening to the Krill, Rostova explained. Their memories are fading. Their history is becoming a set of contradictory possibilities. Soon, the paradox will resolve and the system will settle into a new, stable state, one in which the Krill homeworld was always a barren, lifeless rock. They will not just be dead, they will have never been. Vorlag stared at the impossible data stream, his mind reeling. The implications were staggering. If causality could be broken, then the entire history of the universe was not a fixed text, but a fragile scroll that could be burned at any moment. The Glypton Empire, with its millennia of recorded history, its unbroken chain of tradition, existed only by the grace of a law that could, apparently, be defied. "And your ship," Xylia whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of terror and awe. "The Solitude, what is its function in this nightmare?" Rostova's gaze returned to them, her eyes holding a deep, ancient sorrow. "The Solitude is not a weapon. It is a shield. It is a causal anchor. Its purpose is not to save the Krill with food or shelter. Its purpose is to impose a localized field of absolute temporal stability. It is here to stop their history from being unwritten. It is here to give them the one thing they desperately need: a coherent, stable reality in which to exist, even if only for their final moments." She paused, letting the full weight of her statement settle. "You called it a dangerous ship, strategos. You were correct. It operates on principles that could unravel a star system if miscalibrated by the smallest fraction. It is the most dangerous thing we have ever built, and we brought it here not to threaten, but to preserve the sanctity of a single tragic moment, the right of a sentient species to have existed at all." The line of white light on the ship's hull suddenly began to expand. It did not brighten. It simply grew, stretching from a thin line into a broad band that enveloped the entire vessel. The ship was no longer a black monolith. It was a blade of pure, serene white, a stark symbol of order against the seething chaos of the dying sun. The Glyptons in the conclave chamber could only watch, their philosophies, their pride, and their entire understanding of the cosmos crumbling into dust before this quiet, terrifying display of human knowledge. They had been debating the ethics of throwing a rope to a drowning species, while the humans had arrived to calm the entire ocean. The chamber remained a hall of stunned silence. The Glypton mind, so accustomed to methodical deliberation and the slow, geological pace of political consensus, was struggling to process the sheer scale of the human revelation. Causality was not a philosophical concept. It was a manipulable force of the universe. History was not a record. It was a fragile state of being that could be protected or destroyed. The human vessel, the Solitude, was not a ship in any traditional sense. It was a piece of conceptual technology, a tool designed to operate on the very fabric of reality. It was an act of cosmic engineering so far beyond the Glyptons' own capabilities that it bordered on the divine or the demonic. Vorlag felt his own thoughts fragmenting. The veil of non-interference, the cornerstone of Glypton law, seemed like a child's simplistic rule in the face of this. The veil was designed to prevent the contamination of a culture's development. But what was the point of protecting a culture's future if its past could be simply erased? The humans were operating on a level of ethical and physical understanding that made the Glyptons' most profound debates seem like trivialities. Kalen was the first to move. He slowly, deliberately folded his 6 limbs into the posture of formal concession, a gesture not seen in the conclave for centuries. The crimson of aggression had faded from his carapace, replaced by a deep, resonant blue of respect. "Ambassador Rostova," he chimed, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance. "I have misjudged you, misjudged your species. We saw a monolith and assumed it was a monument to power. We did not see the anchor it truly was." Xylia's violet light pulsed warmly. She looked not at the human ambassador, but at the swirling representation of the unstable timelines. "You have carried a terrible burden," she said, her voice filled with a new and profound empathy. "To know that the universe rests on such a fragile foundation, to possess the means to mend it even for a moment, that is a weight we cannot imagine. Your species, we have catalogued you as chaotic. I see now that we were wrong. You are not chaotic. You are adaptive. You have adapted to a universe far more terrifying than the one our philosophies have allowed us to perk." "Eve." Rostova gave a slight, acknowledging nod. "Adaptation is the core of human existence, Loremaster. We do not have the luxury of millennia of stability. Our history is one of crisis, adaptation, and discovery. We learned early that the universe does not always adhere to predictable rules, and so we learned to build tools to address the unpredictable." Suddenly, the white light emanating from the Solitude intensified. It did not become brighter in a way that would hurt the eyes, but it grew more absolute. A low hum, not of sound but of pure energy, seemed to resonate through the comms channel. On the holographic display, the swirling, chaotic timelines of the K731 system began to change. The frantic, branching paths of possibility began to slow, to untangle. The violent oscillations began to dampen. It was like watching a storm-tossed sea slowly, impossibly grow calm. The human ship was projecting a field of pure, unadulterated order. It reached out, touching the dying star not with force but with a kind of conceptual pressure. The paradoxical energy flares, the temporal distortions that were unraveling the system, were being drawn toward the ship. They did not impact it. They seemed to dissolve against the field, their chaotic nature neutralized by its absolute stability. The screaming chaos on the Glypton's advanced sensors subsided, replaced by a steady, coherent stream of data. The star was still dying. The Krill's world was still being sterilized, but it was now happening in a single, linear progression of time. The event was once again bound by the laws of cause and effect. The Krill would still go extinct, but they would now have an end, not an erasure. They would have a history. The solitude was not saving their lives, it was saving their existence. It was the most profound and most tragic act of charity the Glyptons had ever witnessed. It was an act that valued the memory of a species as much as its life. The process took several units of time. When it was complete, the solitude returned to its obsidian state, the line of white light shrinking back into nothingness. It hung once more in the void, a silent, black sentinel. But now its silence was not menacing. It was reverent. It was the silence of a guardian who had completed their solemn duty. Vorlag finally found his voice, the chimes and tones imbued with a humility he had never before expressed. "Ambassador Rostova, what your people have done here, it is beyond our comprehension. You have acted with a wisdom and an ethical depth that we, in our pride, did not believe a young species could possess. The Glypton Empire owes you a debt." "There is no debt, High Prelate," Rostova replied, her expression still calm, but perhaps with a hint of warmth in her eyes. "We did not do this for you or for recognition. We did it because it was necessary. The sanctity of existence is a principle we hold as absolute. No species should have their story stolen from them by the caprice of a hostile universe." "We would like to learn," Xylia said, leaning forward, her ancient eyes wide with a renewed thirst for knowledge. "Your understanding of the cosmos, your philosophy, it is clear that our own is incomplete. We would propose a formal exchange. Our histories, our sciences, for yours. We would seek to form an alliance, a partnership, so that we might face the true nature of this universe together." Kalen nodded his assent. "Your strategic thinking is on a level we have not encountered. An alliance would be mutually beneficial. We have resources, fleets, and the stability of a galactic power. You have a deeper understanding. Together, the security of this galactic arm would be assured." Vorlag watched the faces of his counselors, seeing the transformation. The fear and suspicion had been replaced by awe and respect. The humans had not come as conquerors. They had come as teachers, showing the Glyptons that the universe was larger, stranger, and more terrifying than they had ever dreamed, but also that it could be faced with courage and a profound sense of duty. He made the decision. "The Glypton Empire formally extends an offer of alliance to the Human Systems Alliance," Vorlag declared, his voice ringing with historic gravity. "Let us stand together as equals." Eva Rostova allowed a small, faint smile to touch her lips. It was a gesture of immense significance, a crack in the dam of her professional composure. "Humanity accepts, High Prelate. We have stood alone for a long time. It will be good to have friends." It felt like a conclusion, a moment of unprecedented unity, born from a crisis that had redefined the very nature of existence. The tension in the conclave chamber finally dissipated, replaced by a nascent sense of hope, of a new beginning. The future, which had seemed so threatened just moments before, now seemed brighter, filled with the promise of shared discovery. But Rostova's smile faded, replaced once more by that deep so. "Lemcom, there is one more thing you must know," she said, her voice lowering slightly, drawing them in. "A final piece of context for why we developed the Solitude and why we value this alliance so greatly." The holographic display behind her shifted again. The stabilized map of the K731 system vanished. It was replaced by a vast intergalactic star chart, showing the spiral arm of their galaxy and the immense, terrifying emptiness of the void between it and the next. "The phenomenon we call asynchronous temporal decay is not a natural occurrence," Rostova stated, and with those words the cold returned to the chamber, sharper and more piercing than before. "We have studied dozens of systems exhibiting these properties, all on the far edges of the galactic rim. It is not random. It is a pattern, a weapon's signature." Vorlag's limbs went rigid. Kalen's battle-scarred carapace seemed to tense, as if preparing for an impact. "We do not believe K731's star collapsed on its own," Rostova continued, her voice a flat, grim report. "We believe it was pushed. The decay was induced. We have found residual energy signatures in the quantum foam of these systems, traces of a technology that operates on principles we can barely model. It is not from our galaxy. The source comes from the void. She zoomed the star chart in, focusing on a patch of absolute blackness between the galaxies. A single, faint symbol appeared there, a ghost of a signal that their own sensors had long ago dismissed as background noise. We did not invent the technology for the causal anchor, she revealed, the final, earth-shattering truth. We found it, a blueprint, encoded in a repeating signal broadcast from a derelict megastructure orbiting a dead star on the edge of the galaxy. It was a message in a bottle, left by a civilization that we believe faced this threat millennia ago and lost. The signal contained the schematics for the solitude and a warning. The chamber was so silent that Vorlag could hear the faint hum of the life support systems, a sound he had not consciously registered in 1,000 years. Ristova's eyes met his, and for the first time he saw not a calm ambassador, but a soldier in a war he hadn't even known was being fought. A war for reality itself. The message was simple, she said, her voice barely a whisper, yet it filled the vast chamber with its terrifying weight. It said, "They unmake what is, they are the silence between the stars, they are coming, forgive us, we failed." The view pulled back, showing the Glypton conclave, small and fragile figures of crystal and light, staring at the holographic representation of the great empty void. And beside them, the calm, resolute face of a human woman, a representative of a species they had once called chaotic and young. But they were not young. They had been secretly standing guard on the edge of oblivion, holding back a tide of non-existence with a single dangerous ship. Vorlag looked at the map, at the symbol of the unknown threat, and then at the symbol of the human systems. He then looked at his own empire, a vast, ancient edifice of order and tradition. He realized with a clarity that was both terrifying and exhilarating that its history, its future, its very existence, now depended on an alliance with the Deathworlders who had come not to conquer, but to hold the line. The crisis of the Krill was over. But the true war, the war for the right to be remembered, had only just begun. The universe was not a mechanism to be observed. It was a story to be defended, and the humans, the keepers of a terrible secret, had just invited them to help write the next chapter. And in the face of the silent, unmaking dark, they would stand together.